I'm just serious, dude. You screw with me, you're gonna be in big ass trouble, okay? Don't smile at me, man. Okay? That's how people like you get shot. I got a bet. I bet by the time you're 21 seconds, you're full like in your head. Okay? And it might be me the one that does.
Umbrella. She's up, she's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So out in Texas, a brother by the name of Lyndo Jones, who was unarmed, sitting in his own car, ended up getting shot by the police and was arrested and charged. So let's find out how somebody sitting in their own car could end up getting shot by the police.
Police in Mesquite are working to gather more information on an officer-involved shooting that started as a burglary call. CBS 11's Brittany Jeffers joins us live at police headquarters with the latest on the investigation and the suspect's condition. Brittany.
Russ, I just checked in with police and they tell me that they're going to spend the day going over body cam video, dash cam video, even checking nearby businesses to see if there's any surveillance that might help in this investigation. But they do say that that suspect continued to fight officers even after he was wounded and cuffed. Now, police were originally called out to the 1300 block of Southtown East Boulevard after someone in that industrial area reported that they saw a man trying to break into a vehicle. When the officer arrived, that suspect was sitting in a truck and the alarm was going off. Now, at some point, officers say that the two got into a scuffle. The officer fired his pistol, hitting the suspect. They say that man continued to fight even after additional officers showed up to help.
I think that I'm not an expert on human strength, but I think if after somebody has been shot and handcuffed and is on the ground, if it still takes 4 large men to hold him down, then that would indicate that maybe there's some other factors in play.
I'm also told that that suspect was taken to the hospital. He underwent surgery this morning and is stable, but at this point, his name as well as the officer's name have not yet been released.
Now, initially, according to the police, some random person called them because they saw a man what they thought was breaking into a car, which turned out to be his own car. And when Officer Derrick Wiley showed up, apparently he was sitting in his own car and his car alarm was going off and he couldn't get it to turn off. Now, I don't know how somebody sitting in their own car who probably just got off of work could end up trying to fight with the police, which would lead to him getting shot. What possibly could have gone down that quickly that led to this man fighting the police, according to their story, and them having no other choice but to shoot this man? And they say even after they shot him, he was still fighting with them. And after he was handcuffed, it still took 4 officers to get him detained. Now, according to what they said, the police have body camera footage, they have dash cam footage, because their story still doesn't explain how this man sitting in his own car could end up fighting with the police, getting shot, and still fighting while he handcuffed. And not only justify the shooting, but actually charge this man with fleeing officers or resisting arrest.
Police now speaking out today after one of their officers were involved in a shooting. Dan Haggerty joining us live over at police headquarters today with what else we know. Dan?
Yeah, a lot of unknowns. Let's start with what we know, though. We do know that last week, police thought Lyndo Johnson was breaking into vehicles. We also know that when they found him, he wasn't breaking into vehicles. He was sitting in his own truck. We also know that police shot him and told us today he was evading arrest. What we still need to find out is the chain of events. What exactly happened that led to gunfire?
It's my understanding that the individual, once he was detained, he attempted to run away from the officer.
Mesquite police charged Lyndo Jones with evading arrest for a situation that landed him in this hospital bed, shot by an officer who thought he was breaking into a truck that turned out to be his.
The situation was that Mr. Jones didn't give the officer ample opportunity to to start an investigation.
Jones's attorney says the investigation has been unconstitutional. The police interviewed Jones in the hospital today without allowing his attorneys to be there.
Our attorneys were actively kept from the room, and when we demanded to see the client and that the unlawful interview stop, we were forcefully removed from the campus.
Police explaining that he wasn't being interviewed as a suspect, but as a potential victim.
At no point in time did this person, did Mr. Jones, request an attorney or even imply that he wanted an attorney.
A big piece of this puzzle will be the body camera footage the police say they do have and will be releasing us here at CBS 11 very soon. The evading arrest charge could actually come with 6 months in jail after he leaves the hospital. As far as the officer who pulled the trigger is concerned, Derrick Wiley, a 10-year veteran of the force, is right now on administrative leave.
So this police representative says that once he was detained, he tried to run away from the police. And apparently Lyndo didn't give Officer Derrick Wiley enough time to quote-unquote investigate him before he decided to have to shoot him. And then after they charge him, they violate his constitutional rights and go in there and interview him without his lawyers in the hospital. And when they're challenged on, breaking the Constitution that they're sworn to uphold, they have all kind of excuses for it. They say, oh, we're not interviewing them as a suspect, we're interviewing them as a victim. But if they're interviewing them as a victim, that would mean that somebody did something wrong here. That Officer Wiley is the perpetrator, but they're still justifying this shooting. And then they say, well, he never asked for his lawyers, but they never let his lawyers come in. Now, this brother, who was not a criminal, who was hardworking, who was a family man, had kids, luckily he survived it. And in this particular case, we get to hear the other side of the story about what happened.
Lyndo Jones says the officer who shot him isn't telling the truth. Here's News 8's David Goins.
Lyndo Jones can take a few ginger steps. Actually, just sitting up in a chair is major progress just 7 days after being shot twice by a Mesquite police officer.
I was scared, man. To be honest, period, scared.
Jones recovering at his Arlington home this afternoon, a day after getting out of the hospital and seeing a charge of evading arrest against him dropped. And for the first time this afternoon, able to share his perspective of what happened in Mesquite 1 week ago.
Had a flashlight in his hand and told me to get out. Opened the door and got out. Get on the ground. For what?
Jones was with his truck on South Town East Boulevard and could not get the alarm system to shut off. Mesquite police say Officer Derrick Wiley, a 10-year veteran, showed up to what he thought was an auto burglary in progress. It wasn't. Mesquite police said Tuesday, within seconds of officers coming into contact with Jones, a scuffle ensued.
I looked at the ground with my hands up in his face, and he shot me. You didn't give me no time to get on no ground.
The 31-year-old was shot in the stomach and back. He then spent the next 7 days at Baylor Medical Center, cuffed to his hospital bed. Late Tuesday, that evading arrest charge was dropped, allowing Jones to leave the hospital and recover at home. But Mesquite police said today they do have the discretion to revisit bringing back that charge.
Honestly, it seems as if this is an effort to continue to intimidate my client.
Jones is now a witness in an ongoing internal affairs and criminal investigation against Officer Wiley. Jones says he has lost more than a week of his freedom. He lost his paycheck, too. His job as a laborer in sandblasting is gone.
They don't make sense to me at all.
Tonight, his focus is on healing and getting back to work, but he wants that officer to be able to tell investigators what happened.
They should have went to him first. You the one with the gun. You with the power. I ain't got no power. I'm a citizen, a working tax-paying citizen.
So this brother who was in his own car, and the police showed up, they told him to get out. He said, I got out. And the police are supposed to tell you why they're detaining you, if they're detaining you. And so Officer Derrick Wiley, within seconds, decides that this is enough cause for me to shoot this man. And he shoot him before he decides to disobey or not, whether to get on the ground. And apparently from what they see from the body footage, it was enough for them to drop the charges that they had on him in the first place of fleeing the officers or resisting arrest or evading arrest. But of course they try to threaten him and hold it over his head and say, well, we can always come back and charge you for this. Now, this is just another example in a long list of examples of how our constitutional rights get violated every day. And thankfully, this man is still alive, but how easily things could go left. It doesn't matter if you're an upstanding tax-paying citizen or whatever. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that think just because you call yourself a different name or you go by something else that they will respect your constitutional rights, but that's just not true. This man was not breaking any laws, and they didn't give him time enough to explain he's sitting in his own car before he was shot by the police. They're not going to give you enough time to say, I identify as whatever you identify yourself as, because they see us as the same. And for us to be sitting here arguing with each other over simple things, while they'll come to each other's defense when they know they're clearly wrong, when they know they break all kind of laws, when they know that the public perception of it will be terrible, they still will defend each other. And believe me, they put so much energy into keeping us divided that we can't afford to waste any time dividing ourselves, arguing over trivial things. Now, we can't be surprised if this brother don't get justice, if we can't unify to stand up and take justice for ourselves as a whole, to stand up and have each other's backs. We're going to keep experiencing the same thing over and over and over. They can continue to do this because there's no consequences for their actions. When we realize the amount of power and control we have, especially over our own destinies, it'll be a whole new ballgame. How we have the ability to create our own schools, our own curriculums. How we have the ability to create businesses, not only businesses, but good businesses that can become successful. When we realize that supporting each other will not only destroy the system that we are living in, it will help us build the system that we need to be living in. It will help us create the nation that we need to create. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do if you cannot protect yourself. If you're sitting in your own car, even if the car alarm is going off and the police can shoot you and then charge you with the crime, you cannot protect yourself. If you come into a community of people who work together and who exercise things like the Second Amendment right to the fullest, the police will be a little bit more hesitant to come into those areas and violate people's laws. Now, this situation could happen to anybody, and we shouldn't wait until somebody end up dead behind something like this before we decide to get together and march and be mad about it. We have centuries of history to be mad about. At some point, we got to start doing something about it.
All right, listen, we're here at Baylor Hospital. Some of you all saw on the feed earlier. There was last Wednesday, a young man by the name of Lyndo Jones was shot while seated in his own car. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition. He's been in the ICU and he's been held for 6 days. The conditions in which he has been held is he was held in handcuffs. His family has been denied access to him. They contacted my office 2 days after he was shot, when they just learned about him being shot. I contacted Mr. Moore, who's a criminal attorney here in Dallas, and to discover what was the criminal nature of his charges, and he discovered that there have been no criminal charges filed against him. And so, of course, we demanded his immediate release from custody, that the chains be removed, that his family be granted access to him. When Mr. Moore went to visit him, he was being unlawfully interrogated by the Mesquite PD under the authority of the Dallas Sheriff's Department, and Mr. Moore had to be forcibly removed from the hospital. We caused a bit of a stir about it by calling the media, preparing a writ of habeas, and went back to see our client, and have moved him out of his bed.
Right.
And now we're trying to figure out where they have moved our client, who was shot once in the back, once in the stomach, who was unlawfully interrogated, who has been unlawfully detained, and they're playing hide the citizen.
This is the second time he's been removed from a room. The first time occurred when, upon hearing that their family member was shot, the mother of his child came looking for him at Baylor, and when she found him after the police wasn't providing her any information, after she found him on her own recognizance, they moved him. They moved him again today, but this is after I came this morning to speak with my client, and me finding out that he was being interrogated by Mesquite PD without my consent or his consent. I tried to end that interrogation immediately, and I was forcibly removed by Baylor PD. And since we've coordinated with Baylor Hospital since then, they're trying to allow us access once again. But once we get back to his room, he's moved. They moved him for a second time, and we don't know where he is.
So I've not seen any clearer case of constitutional violations. Not only do you have the excessive force where the client was shot unarmed in his own car, accused of being a burglar suspect, and the media misled that this man was shot during a burglary. He was then detained in the hospital. His family was denied access to him. They weren't given, as he was fighting for his life, they were not given updates on his medical condition. His doctor said that they were not allowed to give updates. And now he's been denied counsel and literally hidden. Like, they literally took him out of bed. I couldn't imagine anything more blatant, being more blatantly violative of the Constitution. And so we will keep you all updated. Share this video so that the word gets out, because if it's not reported the right way, then they continue to make up stories. To this date, the man has not been charged with a crime.
No charges.
And so I honestly anticipate that they will backtrack and attempt to make up charges, but we've been clear. Every law enforcement officer that we spoke with, and their justification for questioning him today was that he was a witness, not a suspect. So we expect this to be handled the right way. I want the identity of the officer. We want him immediately released from custody. We want
the body cam and the dash cam.
We want the body cam and the dash cam footage released to our offices so we can prepare for our civil suit, and we want our habeas petition granted immediately.
This evening, two starkly different accounts after police shot a man in Mesquite. That man now cuffed to a hospital bed with some serious wounds. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cynthia Aguirre.
I'm John McKay. Police say they were investigating a car burglary. Turns out Lyndo Johnson owned that car, and he was unarmed. News 8's David Goins live at police headquarters tonight, where the department answered some pretty tough questions today, David.
And there are a lot of questions, John, understandably, in an investigation like this. Mesquite police say they've actually learned more about the circumstances surrounding the shooting, in large part because they were able to interview the man who was shot, who's now recovering in a Dallas hospital room. That is Lyndo Jones, and talk to him about that. More on that in a moment. We've also learned that the Mesquite police officer, who is now on administrative leave, his name is Derrick Wiley. He is a 10-year patrol veteran here with Mesquite police. Let's talk you through exactly what police are willing to share about the shooting investigation. This started when Mesquite police responded to a burglary call last Wednesday evening. Now, when officers arrived to a parking lot in the 1300 block of South Town East Boulevard, a pretty busy road here in Mesquite, they found Jones with the vehicle. All police will say right now is that they tried to detain him at that time, and a scuffle ensued, and Jones, who was not armed, was shot twice. On top of that, he now faces a charge for evading arrest. Now today, Mesquite police admitted that the car that was supposedly being broke into back on November 8th, in fact, belonged to Jones, but officers at the time didn't know that.
An individual in a car, it was nighttime, the alarm's going off, and we don't know what he's there for.
There was no justification for this man, who was an occupant of his own vehicle, to be shot twice without ever proposing a threat to Mesquite Police Department.
Now, Mesquite PD saying it's a bit too early to make that strong of a declaration, that coming from one of Jones's attorneys this afternoon, but they did concede tonight that there is a simultaneous internal affairs investigation and criminal investigation against Officer Wiley, who again is on paid leave while this is all going on. Again, that investigation, neither of them are complete this evening, but Mesquite police did say that their interview today with Jones in the hospital as he recovered, focused on the fact that he was shot by police and not so much on the evading arrest charge that they arrested him for that evening. So still an active investigation tonight.
New tonight, a local law enforcement officer is facing heat after photos surfaced of her apparently in blackface. The NAACP in York County is demanding that action be taken against the longtime deputy.
And 10 on your side's Liz Kilmer is live from the York-Poquoson Sheriff's Office tonight, where the sheriff addressed this. So, Liz, what was his response?
Well, Tom and Laura, in response to this, the sheriff says he is reassigning the deputy so that she'll no longer work in schools as she has been for the last 10 years. Now, he did defend her, though, saying that she's a kind person who didn't mean to offend when she went to a Halloween party this year dressed as an African-American congresswoman. With the signature hat and bright suit jacket, a York-Poquoson sheriff's deputy took things a step further while dressing as Congresswoman Frederica Wilson for Halloween.
She did not mock Congressman Wilson nor make any attempt to degrade her. Deputy Browning's intent was to simply portray Wilson as a political celebrity.
With her boyfriend dressed as President Donald Trump, Deputy Jean Browning was only trying to be funny, according to Sheriff Danny Diggs. But NAACP officials aren't laughing.
Is that blackface in and of itself is something that, should not be tolerated.
Brian Smalls, president of the local NAACP chapter, sent a press release to 10 on Your Side after meeting with the sheriff last week.
Essentially, our take from that particular meeting was that nothing was going to be done from an administrative standpoint.
Smalls said at a minimum he wanted Browning removed from her current assignment of teaching drug abuse resistance education in local schools. During a press conference Wednesday, Sheriff Diggs stated she will be and noted that he felt the two organizations were still going to talk and work together on a solution.
I felt that it was understood that I agreed that some type of corrective action would be taken in this incident. I did not hear back from the NAACP until 4:22 p.m. today, when I was notified by email that they were putting out a press release.
Diggs says Browning has been with the office for 20 years and that she's never been accused of racial insensitivity and that she's remorseful.
She now realized that, in hindsight, that she should have used better judgment.
Smalls says he hopes she learns from the incident.
This is a serious situation, and this is nothing to be taken lightly. This is not a game. These are, human beings. These are people that have feelings, they have emotions. They deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
And we're told tonight that Deputy Browning won't be commenting. Her new assignment will be in the courts, where she apparently worked before becoming a DARE instructor. Now, meantime, I did reach out to the Congresswoman's office earlier today, and within the last 20 minutes, I received an email saying the Congresswoman has no comment.
Okay, so you haven't necessarily read the report, but you are familiar with the term black identity extremist?
Well, I think so, yes.
So could you tell me what that term means to you? Do you believe that there is a movement of African Americans that identify themselves as black identity extremists, and what does that movement do?
Well, I'd be interesting to see the conclusions of that report, but I'm aware that there are groups that do have an extraordinary commitment to their racial identity, and some have transformed themselves even into violent activists.
Are you aware of white organizations that do this as well? Given that white supremacy is well-documented, well-researched movements such as the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, et cetera, are they white identity extremists?
I didn't follow that question, please, again.
Is there a term or a report on white identity extremists? You mentioned you were familiar with black people who identify with their racial identity.
Yes, but it's not coming to me at this moment.
Not coming to you?
It's
certainly a group such as the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, and then the skinhead movements, but there's a racial identity white movements that have been identified for sure.
So has the FBI done a report on white identity extremists that are likely motivated to target law enforcement officers? Is there such
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, are you aware of a group called the Sovereign Citizens?
I've heard that group, yes.
And I believe that the Sovereign Citizens is primarily a white organization that absolutely has targeted police officers and killed police officers. You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of all their crimes, but I know they're a group that's known to have violent tendencies.
Could you name an African-American organization that have committed violent acts against police officers? Could you name one today? In this report, they name organizations from 30, 40 years ago, but can you name of one today that has targeted police officers in a violent manner?
I believe I could, but I would want to be to confirm that and submit it to you in writing. But I believe we had, within the last year or so, 4 police officers killed by a group that some have described as extremists.
So what has happened is that there have been a couple of incidents in which African Americans did kill police officers who were not associated with a black organization. And so one, for example, in Baton Rouge was associated with Sovereign Citizens, which is primarily a white group. So you should know that there's a lot of concern in the community, especially from organizations such as Black Lives Matter. By the way, would you consider Black Lives Matter a black identity extremist group?
I'm not able to comment on that. I have not so declared it.
You wrong. You know you wrong.
In your mind, you believe he intentionally shot you? Or was it an accident?
How could it be an accident? You got a taser. You intentionally drawed your gun because you wanted to draw your gun. I can't answer that. You gotta ask him. He know why he did that.